This video is about observations 11 through 17 in the Psychological Observations section of Studies in Pessimism by Arthur Schopenhauer, translated by T. Bailey Saunders. What these observations all have in common, I think, is the difficulty of achieving an objective view of yourself and of other people, the various ways in which human psychology interferes with our ability to see ourselves and others as we really are. The 17th final observation for this video is one of my favorites about mirrors and self-knowledge. So we'll get to that in time. Here's the 11th observation. Every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world. This is an error of the intellect as inevitable as that error of the eye, which lets us fancy that on the horizon heaven and earth meet. This explains many things, and among them the fact that everyone measures us with his own standard, generally about as long as a tailor's tape, and we have to put up with it, as also that no one will allow us to be taller than himself, a supposition which is, once for all, taken for granted. Schopenhauer here notes that it is a sort of general rule of human psychology that I judge other people according to the standard that is my own. I judge them as though they were another version of me. These standards are often very humble. There's a reference to the tailor's tape, right? There's something kind of cheap and humble, low class about it. But it's also a non-objective judgment, right? I'm not judging you according to your merits. I'm judging you according to how well you meet up with my standards, which may or may not suit you. That suggests that there is this kind of built-in, inevitable selfishness in all of our judgments of other people, which we're going to need to work to overcome as we sort of rise towards a higher level of understanding and self-consciousness. The 12th observation. There is no doubt that many a man owes his good fortune in life solely to the circumstance that he has a pleasant way of smiling, and so wins the heart in his favor. However, the heart would do better to be careful, and to remember what Hamlet put down in his tablets, that one may smile and be a villain. We already know of Schopenhauer's admiration for Shakespeare, and here a simple observation, perhaps partly autobiographical, that many people owe their success in life simply not to any intellectual ability or any objective excellence, but to the fact that they smile well, that they have good manners, that they are pleasing to other people, that they are winsome. And this can win people's hearts in their favor, even though, as Shakespeare knew, and as Hamlet says of Claudius, one may smile and yet still be a villain, that the smile is no indication of the moral quality or the excellence of the character behind it. Next observation. Everything that is really fundamental in a man, and therefore genuine, works as such unconsciously, in this respect like a power of nature. That which has passed through the domain of consciousness is thereby transformed into an idea or picture. And so, if it comes to be uttered, it is only an idea or picture which passes from one person to another. Accordingly, any quality of mind or character that is genuine and lasting is originally unconscious, and it is only when unconsciously brought into play that it makes a profound impression. If any like quality is consciously exercised, it means that it has been worked up, and it becomes intentional, and therefore a matter of affectation, in other words, of deception. I'll pause in the middle of this observation because I think this is a fantastic psychological insight that in order to be genuine, in order to have a quality, we must have it, as it were, unconsciously, without knowing it and thinking about it. We must have it, I would say, sort of at the level of being or habit deep in us. If we attempt to fake it, if we attempt to imitate it, then it becomes an affectation. It becomes, we might say, reaching for another Schopenhauer concept, it becomes the product of will, right? I am making myself smile, for example, or I am forcing myself, I am putting on the sort of the show of doing or being something that I am not. And this is where we end up with deception. We'll go back to the rest of this observation now. If a man does a thing unconsciously, it costs him no trouble. But if he tries to do it by taking trouble, he fails. This applies to the origin of those fundamental ideas which form the pith and marrow of all genuine work. Only that which is innate is genuine and will hold water. And every man who wants to achieve something, whether in practical life, in literature, or in art, must follow the rules without knowing them. That's the end of this observation. And just to repeat my comments from before, I think this is brilliant in terms of its observation of the relation between the conscious and the unconscious in our activities. If I know that if I'm doing something and I know that I'm doing it, the more attention I pay to doing it, the more it becomes the product of my deliberate choice and not the sort of overflowing of my being, not something that I'm simply doing habitually or as a matter of what I am and how I am. So when a man attempts to do something that he does naturally, he fails at doing it. I'm reminded here of a story I dimly remember about the great golfer Bobby Jones. I think I was once told that Jones was a fantastic golfer until he sat down to try to write a book about how to golf. And the very process of thinking through how do you hold the club, how do you swing, what is it that makes me so excellent at this, completely spoiled his game. I imagine that's somewhat apocryphal, but there are many other stories like this, I'm certain, of somebody who is a high performer at a certain field until he begins to overanalyze exactly what he does that makes him good at it. And when it moves from the realm of being unconscious activity to being the sort of object of conscious choice at every moment, the will gets in there and fouls things up. And the great expression here at the end is worth remembering. To be great, one must be able to follow the rules without knowing what the rules are. One simply acts and acts well. Next observation. Men of very great capacity will, as a rule, find the company of very stupid people preferable to that of the common run, for the same reason that the tyrant and the mob, the grandfather and the grandchildren, are natural allies. There's not much to this observation, but I think Schopenhauer here is giving us his own mid-19th century version of the Midwit meme, where the very excellent and the very, very stupid have something in common, where it's the strivers and the strugglers and the very earnest people in the middle who stand out against both of them. So an alliance of the extreme ends of the bell curve against the high middle, we might say. 15th observation. This one I need to preface by explaining a bit about what's going on in Ovid. I'm not going to try to translate the Latin directly, but what's being referred to here is a line from Ovid's Metamorphoses, here at the beginning and then again at the end of this observation, which refers to the creation of human beings. What Ovid tells us is that Prometheus, while he makes the other animals to look straight ahead or to look at the ground, that is to say that their skulls are fused onto their spines, so that by their very biology, their very body type, they are made to look out at the world or around or down at the world. Unlike those other animals, the gods have made human beings to walk upright on two legs with their head atop their spine so that they can look not just around at the world and at each other, but also look up at the stars. And so there's this sort of metaphor of the face of the animal is outward and downward facing, but the face of the human being, having this sort of special dignity and privilege from the gods, is such that it can gaze up at the heavens, at the abode of the gods themselves. So that's the reference that Schopenhauer is playing with here in quoting Ovid in Latin. Here's what Schopenhauer writes. That line of Ovid's, proneque cum spectent animalia cetera terram, can be applied in its true physical sense to the lower animals alone. But in a metaphorical and spiritual sense, it is, alas, true of nearly all men as well. All their plans and projects are merged in the desire of physical enjoyment, physical well-being. They may indeed have personal interests, often embracing a very varied sphere, but still these latter receive their importance entirely from the relation in which they stand to the former. This is not only proved by their manner of life and the things they say, but it even shows itself in the way they look, the expression of their physiognomy, their gait and gesticulations. Everything about them cries out, in terram prona, right, face down on the earth. It is not to them, it is only to the nobler and more highly endowed natures, men who really think and look about them in the world and form exceptional specimens of humanity, that the next lines are applicable. Os homini sublime dedit coelumque tueri usit et erectos ad sidera tolere vultus. That is, the gods have given human beings an upturned aspect, commanding them to look towards the skies and upright raise their faces to the stars. So this, as I said, is Schopenhauer using this line from Ovid about the sort of the biological orientation of animals and humans to draw a separation between what we might call, he's accusing these kind of spiritually animalistic humans who may value a great variety of things, but for whom it's all ultimately tied back into the terrestrial, the things that the animal with its forward-looking face is looking at. They receive their importance entirely from their attachment to physical enjoyment, physical pleasures, and material well-being, and that it is what Ovid is speaking of as the privilege of the human race, Schopenhauer seems to be claiming as merely the privilege of, in the modern period anyway, the higher type of individual nature, the one who's able to turn away from the physical towards the spiritual, the intellectual. So that is observation 15. Number 16. No one knows what capacities for doing and suffering he has in himself until something comes to rouse them to activity. Just as in a pond of still water, lying there like a mirror, there is no sign of the roar and thunder with which it can leap from the precipice, and yet remain what it is. Or again, rise high in the air as a fountain. When water is as cold as ice, you can have no idea of the latent warmth contained in it. That's the end of this short observation, and I think Schopenhauer talking here about the hidden power that we may find in individuals, which may often surprise us. The image of the water which is still, which might spray up in a fountain or thunder over a cliff as a waterfall. The behavior of the water at this moment does not reveal its inner power. And in the same way, the soul at rest, the individual person, has no idea what capacity for suffering, and we might add therefore for greatness, he might have. And people may surprise you. The person of whom you thought very little may turn out to have a tremendous soul. And this line at the end, I think, another great aphorism or epigram from Schopenhauer: when water is as cold as ice, you can have no idea of the latent warmth contained in it. So you can look at the still pond and the pool, and it is icy, it is extremely cold. The cold soul, the cold self, the still self, well, it may have a tremendous amount of power stored up in it, which will only be revealed in action. The 17th and final observation for this video is one I mentioned at the beginning about the nature of mirrors. And here it is. Why is it that in spite of all the mirrors in the world, no one really knows what he looks like? A man may call to mind the face of his friend, but not his own. Here then is an initial difficulty in the way of applying the maxim, know thyself. This is partly, no doubt, to be explained by the fact that it is physically impossible for a man to see himself in the glass except with face turned straight towards it and perfectly motionless, where the expression of the eye, which counts for so much and really gives its whole character to the face, is to a great extent lost. But coexisting with this physical impossibility, there seems to me to be an ethical impossibility of an analogous nature and producing the same effect. A man cannot look upon his own reflection as though the person presented there were a stranger to him, and yet this is necessary if he is to take an objective view. In the last resort, an objective view means a deep-rooted feeling on the part of the individual as a moral being that that which he is contemplating is not himself. And unless he can take this point of view, he will not see things in a really true light, which is possible only if he is alive to their actual defects, exactly as they are. I'm going to pause for a comment in the middle of this observation because I think Schopenhauer has given us something really to think about here. There are all the mirrors in the world, and yet I never truly see myself. The first note that I can imagine my friend's face in my mind, but I have difficulty imagining my own. Now, why is this? First, there's the physical metaphor. I only see myself in the mirror from the perspective head on, looking straight at it. I don't see myself from the side, in motion, prior to cameras, certainly. And it seems that I can't encounter myself the way others encounter me. Okay? So that's the physical option. But the, the moral impossibility that parallels this is that I always know it's me when I'm looking at myself, that I can't look upon myself as a stranger. Okay? And yet it is precisely as a stranger that I need to look upon myself to see myself as I truly am. So there's something going on here. My sense of self, my attachment to my own subjectivity is getting in the way of my self-perception. And I think the use of mirrors here to say the mirror doesn't really show you you. It shows you as you, not you as others see you and can see you. In a sense, the one thing I cannot do with a mirror or unless I can overcome this moral difficulty in any way, is to actually see myself and know myself as I truly am, as I truly appear to other people. And so I'm never able to achieve this objectivity, which consists in knowing that what I'm looking at is something other than me. So and so I can't see myself with my own faults. We may even relate this back to the initial observation from this video that everyone measures by his own standard. Well, my own standard is there always, even when I'm looking at myself. And so how am I to know what I truly am? How am I to acquire real and valuable self-knowledge? Schopenhauer goes on. Instead of that, when a man sees himself in the glass, something out of his own egoistic nature whispers to him to take care to remember that it is no stranger but himself that he is looking at. And this operates as a noli me tangere and prevents him taking an objective view. It seems indeed as if, without the leaven of a grain of malice, such a view were impossible. That's the end of observation 17. And closing off this thought, what do I see when I see myself? I see myself as I see anybody else, any other image, and yet there is something in my ego whispering in my ear. That's you, right? That's you, pal, right? That is a person for whom you may need to take special care and special recognition, right? Don't judge him too harshly. Don't evaluate him the way you evaluate others. There's always this knowledge that that's me when I am evaluating myself. And we don't have to think of this merely as a physical or an optical observation of the self. Whenever I think about myself, my behavior, my triumphs, my crimes, I'm thinking of them as being mine, right? They're mine. Something is magnified about them in my own consciousness. They are especially great or especially terrible because they're mine. And this reference, this Latin reference, this whispering in my ear, that's you, acts as a Nole me tangere. This means do not touch me. These are the words of the resurrected Christ to Mary Magdalene at the tomb, indicating I'm not. It's not appropriate or worthy that you should touch me. This is what my image says to me, right? When I look back, when I look at my image, there's something in it that says, don't be too harsh on this one. Don't judge this one the way you would judge others for their excellence or their quality. And his final turn here, sounding uh, maybe a note of hope, but also a note of menace. That what we really need is a tiny grain of malice, and I think it's self malice. It's malice towards myself. I have to look in the mirror and say, I'm going to get at the truth about that guy. I'm going to understand the objective quality of that guy's defects, and to do so, I'm going to have to treat him like he's an alien to me, like he's a stranger, like he's not me. I'm going to have to somehow find a way to overcome the ego's prejudice in favor of itself that Schopenhauer's been dwelling on in this observation about mirrors. So that is this is my video about observations 11 through 17 in Psychological Observations from Studies in Pessimism. We will take a look at the next observations in another video. Thanks for watching today. Goodbye.